cops and other law enforcement people of Reddit, what were some cases you worked on that made you think, even if for a moment, that something supernatural paranormal was going on? Here is my perceived woman story. Spoiler alert. As a result of posting this last time, users suggested she could have suffered from catatonic schizophrenia, was driving along and found a girl just standing in the middle of the road. My initial thoughts was to tell her to pay attention, but it was clear that while the lights were on, nobody was home. During my whole time with her, she never uttered a word. I was left in a weird situation. She had done nothing, clearly needed help, but medically nothing seemed wrong. As I am pondering what on earth I should do, the girl suddenly starts spinning. Now spinning is not illegal, and I'm starting to think this girl is one of those protesters that wind up police. I've dealt with Troll Station before, so I think crack on. Spin to your heart's content. Then she loses her balance and falls, whacking her head on the side of the police car. Great. So I call an ambulance, but she seems fine. Still not talking, but she is looking up at the sky. It's a nice day, so fine, enjoy the sun. I do some writing and look back at her now bright red face and watering eyes and realize she is trying to damage her retinas by forcing herself to look directly at the sun. That's a new one on me, so now I'm holding a book or something above her to shield her eyes. Ambulance arrives and we get to hospital, and now she has forgotten how to walk. Now I'm 99% sure she is a wind-up merchant, but I get her a wheelchair. In the wheelchair she strikes up I'm a little teapot pose and keeps this up for the next hour. Zero movement, just frozen with her arms out. So I now have 3 potential situations. 1. She is pretending to be frozen in time. 2. She is suffering from a mental health issue. 3. She has been possessed. By now I'm convinced it's the latter, but I section her and leave her with professionals. A week later I call the hospital and they tell me she is still frozen. I wonder if she's still in teapot mode to this day. My brother is a deputy, and at the time I worked as an EMT for a few small towns in northeast Colorado. I frequently went on ride-alongs with him while waiting for 9/11 calls to come in. This took place in Amherst, Colorado. The town is very small. Amherst has about 50 people, a church, some houses, a grain tower, and a park. It was about 3 AM and we were about to call it a night. As we were making our last check on Amherst, we noticed movement at the park but couldn't tell exactly what was going on because it was pitch black. We drove up and stopped alongside the dirt road, flipped on the spotlight, and as we moved the light around the park, it finally settled on the back of a young girl, maybe 13, sitting on a swing with her back facing us. We left the spotlight on her. She wasn't moving. She just sat there facing away from us, looking down at the ground. Needless to say, it was a very creepy situation. We both looked at each other with that face you would make when something is out of the ordinary. I quickly suggested that we should call her over using the PA system. He agreed. As we looked back over, she was gone. I mean, no signs of anyone anywhere. The park was in a wide open area. She couldn't have gotten out of sight in the amount of time that we had our exchange of words. I remember saying, should we get out and look for her? Maybe she hid behind one of the park toys or something. My brother just looked at me and said heck to the no and drove away. It still creeps me out to this day. Obligatory. Not my story but my uncle's. Years ago my uncle told us about a woman who would call the police station just about every night claiming that fairies or elves were breaking into her house and stealing her food. As is custom, every time she calls, they send a unit to check on her. My uncle gets it about 2-3 times per week. Every night they stop by her house and reassure her that no one has broken in and calm her down. One night when he gets to the house, she has poured powdered sugar all over the floor to record their tracks, and my uncle says he literally has to do a double take. All over the floor of her kitchen are these little tracks, tiny like nothing he's seen before. His partner starts taking photos and trying to figure it out. A few other officers come in, as most of them had gotten the call to her house too and want to see it. 10 police officers, all completely baffled as to what these weird little prints are. Turns out a possum had babies and they were sneaking into her kitchen for warmth or food. The prints looked so foreign because most of the time baby possums are carried by their mother, not running around. 7 are rounded up and released in a less residential area. Police officer working the desk 1500 2300. Fire alarm signal goes off. Many years ago the police department offered alarm monitoring service. Still had 10, 12 places that were hardwired and it would require pulling apart a lot of equipment to disconnect the system, so we just kept it going. First shift dispatch is already punched in, so she took it. I'm headed out the door to the fire department when 911 rings from the same address. I answer it. No one in the other end. Assume they barely got to call before passing out. I bolt out the back door, hop in a squad car, radio in the 911 call on channel 3 that both police fire can hear and that I'm going directly to the house. Arrive just as another unit shows up. No signs of smoke. No sign of anything. Older woman comes walking up the street pushing a wheelchair with an elderly lady, her mother. They live there and just went out for an early evening stroll before dinner. Tell them what we have going on. Nobody else lives there, and as far as the elderly lady can remember, the alarm was disconnected from the house years ago during some renovations. They don't have any alarm system either, just a couple of smoke fire detectors. We do a walk around the house, get to the back door off the kitchen, and you can clearly see and smell gas. We turned off the gas at the main, set up some fans to air it out, and find a cracked gas line going to the oven. Daughter said she spilled some coffee she was making for their walk and had to move the oven a few inches to clean. Probably broke the line pushing the oven back in. Nothing else in the house is disturbed and both phones are on the hook. Fire chief shows up about 15 minutes into the call. He goes over to the two ladies and gives them both a hug. He's nearly in tears. The elderly lady in the wheelchair. Her husband was the fire chief 60+ years ago for our department. The daughter. Her husband passed away a few years ago. He was also a member of our department. Never believed in ghosts or spirits, but that call made me think maybe people who spend their lives doing good are allowed by some power to look over their loved ones every so often. Crazy old woman called because she heard someone repeatedly banging on her front door and garage door. It's after midnight and I get there, and the house is in the middle of the woods with nothing around for miles. I talk to the lady and she insists I check her large shed out back. So I open the shed door and peek in with my flashlight, and the entire shed is filled with creepy large homemade dolls. They're each probably like 2 to 3 feet tall and sitting upright facing the door. The hair on my neck went up for a minute. I didn't truly believe that something supernatural was going on, but dolls are just really freaking creepy. It's probably too late for this to surface, but this is my dad's story. He went to a call where a father had gone crazy and decided to shoot his family. He killed his wife and was looking around trying to find his 5-year-old son to shoot him. The boy had run outside and was trying to hide on the side of the house behind the trash cans. The father eventually found him and point blank emptied nearly a full magazine at the boy. When my dad arrived, they found the boy in shock, hiding right where his dad found him. Not a wound on his body. There were bullet holes in the side of the house all around the boy. When they finally got to question him about it, they asked him what happened when his dad found him on the side of the yard. The boy replied, "The angel was in front of me with a shield, and he saved me. He pushed the gun away from me." I'm a second-generation firefighter. My father spent the latter days of his career as a fire safety director at a massive mental asylum. Our state version of OSHA has to come and do inspections at all facilities. His was no exception, so the OSHA inspectors make their way to an abandoned part of the facility that used to house the criminally insane, the absolute worst of the worst. Serial killers, rapists, cannibals, etc. My father left them with keys and a flashlight because the electricity didn't work. The inspectors were radioing back to my father that they kept hearing talking and footsteps, which was impossible. Not even squatters could move around because each section is isolated with locked doors to prevent escape. Eventually, the inspectors give up and actually flee without finishing. My dad decides to stick around and check the alarm boxes. They didn't. As he is checking one of the alarms, he feels as if someone is watching him from down the hall. As he looks, a shadow forms with a head, shoulders, torso but no legs and just 2 holes where there should be eyes. My dad noped the heck on out of there. Since the hospital has shut down, it has been on Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters and a myriad of other shows and movies. My dad has been in some of them. Jason from Ghost Hunters called it the scariest place he's ever investigated. Fire M's here. This is not my story. It happened on a different shift. Big Captain working overtime with us one day told it to us. and it creeped me out. The captain was on the first due engine company that was dispatched to a residential fire alarm in the middle of the night. Our dispatch protocols require us to send the first due unit emergency to a fire alarm, while the second due engine and ladder company respond routine. We go to tons of fire alarms and 99% of the time they are caused by a faulty system or burnt food, so we usually don't get too worked up over them. Anyways, as they approach the neighborhood they see the orange glow in the distance, and when they get on scene they find a 4,000 square foot house with heavy fire showing on the rear and that had already broken through the roof. The call was then upgraded to a working structure fire and more units were dispatched to assist. The captain of the first due stayed on the outside the whole time. He was incident commander until the 1st battalion chief arrived on scene and took over, and then he assumed the safety role. So, he's on the outside, in radio contact with crews that are inside fighting the fire. After the bulk of the fire had been extinguished and as operations were winding down, the captain sees smoke inside a second-story window and asks crews inside to go inside the room on the BC corner to make sure the fire hadn't spread to the other side of the house. The crews search for a few minutes and radio back. There's no room there, so the captain is a bit confused, as he is staring at what is clearly a window that is attached to a room of some sort. He relays detailed instructions of where the room should be to the crews inside, and they again advise that they can't find anything. Incredulous, the captain asks the incident commander for permission to go inside of the structure so he can show the interior crews exactly where the room in question is. His request is granted, and he goes inside, walks up the staircase, and walks towards the corner in question. There's no room there, just a hallway with a corner, no doorway, no window, no room. Knowing that there has to be something behind the wall, they breach the drywall and crawl through to find a child's bedroom. The bedroom had a dresser, a desk, and a perfectly made bed that looked as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. For whatever reason, the owners of the home decided to wall off the bedroom and leave it just as it was, untouched and inaccessible. The captain said it was one of the strangest and eeriest things he had seen in a while. Usually that means the child died and that couldn't deal with the grief of dealing with their things. Cop here. Partner and I were dispatched to a welfare check. Elderly guy. Nobody had seen him in a few days. Mail overflowing in mailbox. Missed a doctor's appointment. Car hasn't moved, etc. We both know we are about to find a body. We arrive on scene and can't get anyone to the door. Look through the window and sure enough, we can see his foot on the floor in the living room. My partner is a corporal and pulls rank and makes me go first. Door is unlocked and as soon as we open it we smell a mostly fresh dead body. Almost relieved, we both enter and he tells me to check vitals on dead dude. He is obviously dead, with lividity, dried feces on him and dried saliva around his mouth. So I go to stand over him and see if I can get a pulse, at which point he takes a deep breath, rolls over, and asks why we are in his house. At this point we both start screaming oh shoots and what the fricks as we both run out of the house. We called EMS and they transported him. Said they couldn't get a blood pressure or pulse on him. I think he died a week later in the hospital. I still get jokes about raising the dead. This is a good supernatural paranormal story rather than a creepy one. I'm a detective and spent some time as an expert on crimes and crimes against children. It was the best, worst assignment I've had. One case I had came in at midnight. A young woman with a toddler comes into one of the precincts to report her ex-boyfriend forced her during a custody argument. Long story short, it was legit, and one of the most violent and sadistic cases I've ever had, so I'll spare the gruesome details. I still have no idea how this woman made her own way to a precinct with a toddler. Part of the investigation requires me to talk to the toddler. Victim said the toddler was present for everything. I'm a child forensic interviewer as well. During the interview the toddler recalls their father becoming angry and hitting the mom. Then, the toddler said that the nice woman showed up and she couldn't see past the nice woman. The nice woman held her and told her that they were both going to be safe and sang her a song in a different language. The toddler said the nice woman went over to the front door and knocked on the door. Then, the nice woman helped them and their mom to the car before flying away. In the victim's interview, she said that her ex-boyfriend had a knife to her throat and put it to the skin to cut her throat open, but he got distracted for some reason then ran out of the apartment. She had no explanation why. The suspect was caught about 8 hours later. He confessed to absolutely everything. When I asked him about the knife to the throat, he said this: "I swear to God I was gonna cut the BS throat open. But I thought I heard a knock at the door and thought it was the police. Once I saw it was clear, I ran outside." He is now serving life in prison, and the mom and toddler are safe and doing well. I'd love to know more about the nice woman. Dang, that's the coolest sad thing I've ever read. Props to the nice woman. This was told by my dad when I was 12. Even now, when I ask him about the story, he can remember every vivid detail like it just happened last week. My dad was in the police force for 20 years, and when we just a rookie, he had to conduct nighttime roadblocks meant to catch drunk drivers. They had done it many times before, and this night started routine enough for them. That was until this Toyota Corolla drove up to them with what looked like a white blanket on its roof, flapping in the wind. They thought it was weird but did not see anything amiss about it. One of them even joked that this guy was multitasking by drying his laundry and driving home at the same time. The laugh stopped when the lone car came closer and all of them saw what looked like a woman in white lying face down on top of the car. The woman seemed to slide like a slug backwards until she disappeared behind the car as it eventually came to a stop in front of them. It took a few minutes for my dad's team to recompose themselves as they stared at each other as if to say, "You guys saw that right?" The most senior of them finally stepped up and shot the usual questions to the driver. There was a noticeable quiver in his voice as he made conversation and asked him to step out of the vehicle. My dad's team inspected the whole vehicle, including the boot, and found nothing strange in it. The driver was a good-looking staff sergeant in the army who was heading home from a company event earlier that night and admitted to have had a few cans of beer. He said he laid down in his bunk to sleep it off, hence why he was driving home at that time. It was 4 AM. He passed their sobriety test and they started to ask him if he saw anything weird during his drive. Initially he said no, but after more questioning, he mentioned that he had to swerve to avoid what looked like a bird that was flying upside down. It was spooky but didn't think that was a detail worth sharing with police officers. The senior then told the guy to chill out at a 24-hour coffee shop before heading home. The locals believe that if a malevolent spirit follows you, making a pit stop confuses them so they can't set up shop in your house. After some confusion of his own, the driver finally caught on and nodded in agreement. After the guy leaves, they call into the station and cut the night short. Never knew what happened to the driver, hope he's alright. Family member of a cop here. Where I grew up there is an abandoned factory that high school and college kids will visit, usually around Halloween, because it's scary enough in the dark. It also houses a decent amount of homeless people, so once every few months the cops will come in, do a sweep, and force anyone there to leave. One night my uncle is working and there's a call to the non-emergency line saying there's a lot of movement at the building, that the caller can see light on every floor but the first. My uncle and a few other officers respond. No more than 10 minutes have gone by when my uncle gets there. There's no one around, but there's plenty of light pouring out of the openings where the windows once were. The officers all agree it looks more like fire than flashlights, so they call the fire department as a precaution. They walk into the first floor and start searching for the stairs. They find them and ascend to the second floor. There's no light anywhere. Same with the third, fourth, fifth floors. They sweep the entire building, every nook and cranny, even the roof. There's no light source and no one there that they can find. Fire had arrived shortly after they went in and they couldn't see anything from the outside other than the subtle glow of flashlights, which was faint. Nothing like what my uncle and the others had seen. But my uncle said that what was even more unsettling was that none of the homeless areas, which were usually comprised of piles of trash along with cardboard boxes and blankets, were there. Not that they didn't find any homeless people, but that there was no sign that anyone had been in there at all, ever. IQ nurse here. We had a patient that was dying. No family. Around 3 AM the guy started crying and asking why the little girl in the yellow dress was in the hospital. We assure him there is no little girl. He cries even more saying yes there is, she is at the foot of the bed. Kid you not, the man passed in the next few minutes. Myself and my pod partner blame the hallucination on the meds we were giving him to keep him comfortable. Next night, new patient in the room. She's completely alert and oriented. About 3 AM she hits her call light. She wants to know why the little girl in the yellow dress was outside her room. We told her it was just her imagination from being in a strange place. Not 5 minutes later the guy in the next room goes into full cardiac arrest and unfortunately we can't receive him. Of course we absolutely freak. 2 different nights. 2 different patients see the same thing. All followed by death. So this actually happened to a friend of mine who isn't the cop in this story but is the actually family. So this happened maybe about 5 years ago. My friend is in his mid-30s. He and his wife had a 7-month-old baby and a 5-year-old son. Wife was a stay-at-home mom and dad owned his own business and had a very flexible schedule. He would take his son to school in the morning, pick him up, etc. So it's about 11 AM they call the cops because they keep hearing a strange sound in the home, sound like feet or something, and though he was sure it was nothing he wanted to make sure. So he says the cop arrives and the first thing the cop says is, "Why isn't your son in school?" My friend is puzzled and says, "Huh?" The cop says, "Your boy is sitting outside on your lawn." My friend again looks at the cop strange, looks on the lawn and says, "Officer, my son is in school. I dropped him off this morning." The officer looks back, sees nothing and looks puzzled. At this moment my friend's cell phone rings and it's his son's school. Apparently he has had some sort of allergic reaction to some finger paints that had egg base or something in it, allergic to eggs, and became extremely swollen. Throat swollen and couldn't breathe, rushed to the hospital. The cops give them an escort to the hospital so they can fly through lights and all. Arrive at hospital and the son is doing fine, is stable, got the lil shot to help him and everything. The cop waits to see how the family is doing and wants to check on the kid. My friend is appreciative and lets the cop come up and he says that he had never seen a paler face in his life and he said the cop looked as if he had seen a ghost and said, "That's the kid I saw in your yard." My friend told me this, it creeped me the frick out. I didn't believe it but the wife co-signed the whole thing. TL. DR cop came to friend house investigating foot sounds. Cop saw a kid in the yard. My friend's son was in school. Friend gets call that son is in hospital for anaphylaxis. Cop goes to hospital, says the kid he saw in the yard was in fact my friend's kid. You've been visited by luckiest pig in the world. Comment lucky piggy below to get some of his luck. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.